Hello. Today we're going to discuss and explore the impact and implications of mental health disorders among youth in contact with the juvenile justice system. This will include a discussion on the prevalence and nature of mental disorders among juvenile justice population, how these disorders are identified and treated, the important role the family can play in supporting youth, and practical tips and strategies for juvenile justice staff caring for and supervising youth. We will begin by discussing why it is important to be aware of issues related to adolescent development, particularly for youth under the supervision who may be experiencing the added complication of mental health, substance use disorders, or trauma reactions. We will then briefly review each of the topics to be covered during this training. Finally, we will talk about how to get the maximum benefit from this training with the ultimate goal of creating a safe environment for all. The purpose of this exercise is to identify you and your role in the juvenile justice system, how you think about the importance and challenges of what you do, how you think about teenagers, what teenagers are like, and how teenagers relate, and the universal aspects of adolescence, how we are all alike. For instance, all adolescents go through puberty, have emotional changes, and go through a period of sexual development. Adolescent development. Why is this important? Some things about kids are universal. Youth are more than just little adults. View youth through the lens of the developmental process, emotional versus cognitive development. We're going to talk about the speeding car without brakes or a steering wheel. Youth are inseparable from their families and communities of origin. We will be focusing on the development features of adolescence and how these differ from adults in significant ways. We will examine normal adolescent development and the common behaviors associated with this developmental stage. Some have compared adolescence to speeding cars without brakes or a steering wheel. It is not uncommon for youth to act impulsively, often engaging in serious risk-taking behaviors without fully considering the consequences. Please let me emphasize, adolescence is a normal developmental stage. Adolescence is different from adulthood. Adolescence is a difficult developmental stage. Uneven development during adolescence is not a linear process. Some youth reach milestones before others do. The influence of peers, both negative and positive. The importance of families and communities in understanding and successfully intervening with youth. As you listen to the material today, there are a few things you should consider. First is the complicated nature of adolescent development. As we'll discuss in future sections, this is a time when youth are in the midst of significant cognitive, physical, emotional, and sexual development. Second is how juvenile justice involvement can further disrupt or derail normal development. And finally, consider how all this can be further complicated by mental illness, substance abuse, and trauma-related issues. Now let's hear from some youth as they talk about their contact with the juvenile justice system.
Really hard. It was scary. But with parents there, it helps a lot. You need to learn to talk and be brave. Everybody makes mistakes. And I think the first step is acknowledging that you did make a mistake, and now it's time to fix it and talk about it.
My son got to 8th grade, my son got into the juvenile system. A lot of stuff happened at the school because the school is not even familiar on how to work with kids with conduct disorder or bipolar. So he was in a behavior class, but he had a teacher that didn't know what that was. So she had a group of young men that was struggling, and when they got out of hand, she sent them to the police department. So that's where it started off with the juvenile, and I had to start going to court.
A lot of them feel that the parents are always making excuses for the children, that they don't really deserve that. Instead of being able to recall when you were 16 and maybe you might have done some things that wasn't very proper for you to do too. But they don't understand that now. That's far past. So when you bring all this stuff to them, they think that you're really being a nuisance and that you want special treatment. And it's not that you want special treatment, it's that time when you ask for it, you really need the special treatment so that you can be at rest with, with what's going on with your child. You want that, you need that, A lot of times I can't even sleep at night for thinking about my grandchildren being incarcerated, hoping that they're okay, that they're not hurting anybody, and that nobody's hurting them.
He's paranoid about everything in life now. He's so afraid. Everything on a daily basis. I can imagine the things that's going through his mind. He's so afraid that he's going to do something wrong, and he's going to have to pay the price for the rest of his life.
And so it was difficult for me as a parent to admit that my child had mental illness, admit that I had some struggles myself, and admit that now he's in the juvenile system. It was difficult.
Now that you've seen this video, can you think about how, if you're a parent, what a frightening experience this can be for you and your youth and your family? How difficult it may be for a novice to understand the juvenile justice system. What role do schools play in introducing youth to the juvenile justice system? And how some behaviors that get youth referred to the juvenile justice system are typical of adolescents with histories of trauma or with mental health or substance abuse related issues. Our training goals. Let's talk about what's in it for me. What should you expect to get out of this training? One of the primary goals of this training is to make your job less stressful, more enjoyable, and safer. It should facilitate increased understanding of justice-involved youth with mental health, substance abuse, and trauma disorders, increase familiarity with issues of adolescent development and how they impact youth behavior. They should emphasize the role of the family and the community in obtaining optimal outcomes for youth and the public. Provide practical tips for successful, positive interactions with youth. Increase knowledge of effective, evidence-based practices to treat youth with mental illness, co-occurring disorders, and histories of trauma. It should improve job safety and reduce job-related stress, and it should also increase job satisfaction. In the next module, Module 2, we will focus on the interaction of the juvenile justice and mental health systems. We will examine how youth with mental health illnesses often come in contact with the juvenile justice system and how their mental illness needs may or may not be addressed. We will also look at how community-based mental health services are a more effective alternative to justice-involved youth with mental health and substance use disorders. In Module 3, we will review adolescent development. We will spend time talking about what normal adolescent behavior is. We will also examine some very basic aspects of brain development. In Module 4, we will review common mental health illnesses seen in adolescents. We will also review common substance use disorders, and we will review some of the most commonly used screening and assessment measures used in the juvenile justice setting. In Module 4B, we will discuss the issues of childhood trauma, the incidence of trauma among juvenile justice population, and how you are likely to encounter trauma-related issues in your work with youth. Module 5, we review some of the most common treatments and interventions for youth, and we will highlight some evidence-based practices. In Module 6, we will focus on the practical tips and strategies for working with youth. And finally, in Module 7, we will focus on the important role the family is in achieving the optimal outcomes for youth. Throughout this training, you will hear from youth and families about their experiences. Hearing directly from them helps illustrate many of the most important points of this training. In a few moments, we're going to watch a film. We want to highlight that despite all the challenges they face, these youth can change and succeed and excel if provided with proper treatment, support, and family involvement. You, in your role, can have a dramatic influence on the rehabilitation of these youth, and please remember, you don't need to be a therapist to be therapeutic. Now let us hear from some youth and family members talking about how important it is not to abandon hope for these youth.
I think the vast majority of individuals, if given the proper guidance, if given the emotional and psychological support, can make a change in themselves.
Well, in a neighborhood that I grew up in, many people don't get a second chance like I have. Many people just go straight to jail. They never have a nice lawyer or have a nice probation officer. They never listen. They always start off at the wrong foot. If they get a second chance, they go back to their old ways.
I do see myself as a changed individual, a changed person, not just mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I see myself changing every single day in different aspects. It's an ongoing process. It's really hard to explain. It's not easy, but it's just something that I really had to keep my head focused on, that everything in 1 second could be taken away. I do have to keep on being in a positive mind state and keeping myself in a positive mood, I guess, and realizing that everything will be better eventually. It just takes time and effort.
Now I see myself as a man. And back then I see myself as a boy, trying to do things that a man not supposed to do. You know what I'm saying? Like now I go to school, I work, I help my father pay the bills. That's things that a man do. Back then I was trying to be something that not a man, trying to sell drugs and gangbang stuff. That's not what a man is made for. So now I look at myself as a man, and back then I look at myself as a boy.
Justice-involved youth are not hopeless. How you work with them and their family members can have a tremendous impact on what happens to them in their lives. Justice-involved youth with mental health, substance abuse issues need and want support from treatment providers, from their family, and from you. Listening is often the most powerful way that you can provide help and support.